think we're on a maximum amenity area coverage, I think.
Yes, we are. So that's item F in the memorandum. So at the present time, the township's official plan establishes lot coverage maximums, which we're going to be carrying forward into the new official plan. And of course, along with that is the 1/10 permission for exceedances, and that's not proposed to change either. We spent quite a bit of time through the process discussing whether we should be adding amenity area coverages as well. And with that in mind, we proposed to establish amenity area coverage maximums, with these maximums expressed as a percentage of the lot area. And we included a table within the official plan, which is reproduced in the memorandum. And of course, amenity areas include sun decks, patios, fire pit areas, sport courts, pools, hot tubs, and similar features that don't contain a roof. But it wouldn't include driveways, septic systems, pathways, and stairs, because those are necessary elements of every lot. With everything else, you have choices to make. Do you really need a sun deck? Do you want a sun deck? Where should it go? And so on. But everyone needs a driveway and everyone needs a septic system. We asked in the survey whether the amenity area caps were supported. About 63% said yes, 37% said no. Many folks indicated that they thought some type of control was necessary. Others felt that this was another example of overreach. I think overreach was the term used quite often in many of the answers to the questions in the survey. Other respondents felt the type of restriction favors the owners of larger lots, and it will be hard to enforce. We also asked in survey question 9 whether it was appropriate to permit small patios, fire pit areas, and small amenity areas in the required 20-meter setback from the lake. And in response, 80% said yes, 20% said no. And of course, many indicated that, it's the area within this distance of the lake where these types of amenities are the most desirable. I can't help but agree with that. Clearly, this is a significant change if it was implemented in the official plan and then through the zoning bylaw. And I anticipate that if we went down this road, there would be a significant increase in the number of minor variances requested going forward. In thinking about it further, however, I'm not sure that including amenity area caps in the official plan and then in the zoning bylaw is the best way to go, primarily because amenity areas are very difficult to measure in all cases. When you're dealing with buildings and structures and foundations and roofs and so on, very easy to measure, very easy to determine compliance. But when you start getting into outdoor patios, when does the patio turn into a driveway? When is a driveway not a patio? When is a sun deck something else? And so on and so on. It becomes very challenging in my view. And I'm concerned that we may be setting up something in the official plan and zoning bylaw that is very difficult, if not impossible, to enforce. And this is primarily because zoning bylaws are intended to be black and white. They're intended to be yes, no, yes, you can do something, no, you can't. And it has to be easily understood and implementable. So my thinking is that there is merit in considering an amenity area cap of some kind, but the best place to house that rule or standard is in your site alteration bylaw, because doing so allows for some discretion in the decision-making process and through the permitting process that is required under that bylaw. I understand you're having all kinds of other discussions on the site alteration bylaw, and I think this is the best place for those discussions to be held. So my recommendation is that the official plan not include an amenity area coverage cap. So in other words, I'm suggesting we take some numbers out of the draft official plan and that the official plan direct instead that the site alteration bylaw deal with this issue. It's not like we're pushing this down the road. We are, in a way. I really do think the site alteration bylaw is the best place to deal with something this detailed, this complex, and complicated. And it also allows for more, as I mentioned, discretion in the decision making process. I don't know if Mr. Pink wants to augment what I just went through because I'm not involved in the site alteration bylaw review underway. And if he has any additional comments, so now would be the time.
Mr. Pink?
Thank you. No, I think I look to the committee discussion, but I wonder, Mr. McDonald, if it's worthwhile to really, it might be frame the discussion better if we discuss the next recommendation or the next matter as well, because they're very interrelated. And I think it'd be better to see the full picture, and then we can discuss both matters together. Just a suggestion to the chair and Mr. McDonald.
No, that's a good point. So the next section deals with site alteration, and so there has been quite a bit of discussion on site alteration as well, in terms of whether this is something the official plan should deal with, and then require implementation through the zoning bylaw. So we said in the draft official plan that the site alteration bylaw required that no less than 75% of any lot in the waterfront area be left in an unaltered state, meaning that up to 25% could be altered. The 25% cap would take into account the maximum lot coverage, which is up to 10% in some cases, but less on smaller lakes, and would allow, and of course include the maximum amenity area coverages I just went through, plus any areas required for driveways, septic systems, and walkways. So we asked a question in the survey about this as well. 60% said it was a good idea, 40% said it was the opposite. Those in favor believe that there is a need for more controls to control over development, protect the character and environment of the waterfront area. Those opposed had concerns about the implications of this new standard on the ability to use waterfront properties and the challenges inherent in enforcing such a standard. Some folks also thought the question and the proposal only affected the first 60 meters adjacent to the shoreline. It did not. It would have affected the entire lot. I continue to believe, as I mentioned earlier, that there is a need to control the amount of a property that can be altered. However, I also recognize that there are many different contexts and many different types of properties. Some properties have significant rock outcrops, others don't. Some have significant slopes, others don't. And context is very important, and it makes it very challenging to come up with a number that works in every circumstance. And enshrining numbers in an official plan that can be difficult to implement in the first hand, and then secondly, perhaps dependent on a number of site-specific context issues to determine whether it's the right number or not, is problematic. So I continue to believe, as I said earlier, that this is a good thing to regulate and control, but it is something that should solely be dealt with in your site alteration bylaw again. So what I'm suggesting is that the site alteration bylaw deal with what the site alteration cap should be, and it may actually be, there may actually be a need to create a sliding scale so that the numbers are different if you have a smaller lot than it would be for a bigger lot, because 25% of a big lot allowing to be altered is a big number, and that may not be appropriate. And in addition to that, I'm recommending that your site alteration bylaw also include an amenity area cap as well, and that both those things are dealt in one bylaw and dealt with at the same time. Therefore leaving the lot coverage to the zoning bylaw, but everything else to the site alteration bylaw. So those are my recommendations.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McDonald. I just have a quick question. I don't see anybody else here. Having sat through some what was LPAT discussions, my concern would be if we don't reference this somewhere in our official plan, that it isn't going to have as much impact when we get to the next level of government. Who doesn't really look at our bylaws as far as I can discern from sitting through these discussions. So that's my concern. I understand where you're coming from, but if we don't reference this in our official plan, are we not going to be blocked because we haven't put it in our official plan?
So the simple answer is no, and I'm not suggesting we be silent on it. I'm suggesting that the official plan require that the site alteration bylaw do certain things, and we can indicate very clearly why those are good things to do and why it's in the public interest to do it. What I'm basically saying is we should not put numbers in the official plan. on these issues. But I'm more than happy to create as much language as is necessary to support the need to have these numbers in the site alteration bylaw. You don't need any official plan policy to prepare a site alteration bylaw. It's independent. It's not a bylaw under the Planning Act. It's a bylaw under the Municipal Act. So it's a different piece of legislation to start off with. But certainly, to your point, Madam Chair, it's good to have some clear direction in the official plan to help with those further future discussions.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Chair Bishman. Further to what you said, if there is some reference in the official plan, is it not better? Because we change bylaws all of the time. We amend them, and it's very, very simple to do. And that a previous council comes up with a bylaw, and then somebody comes up and we change them. And that, so if there's some sort of a reference that makes it a little lay it out a little bit better in the official plan, I would support that. But I'll leave it to Mr. McDonald. Thank you.
Councillor Hayes.
Thank you. Through you. Recommendation number 6 says that you would remove the cap and instead it would go to the site alteration bylaw. We have not finished working on our site alteration bylaw. So what happens if we decide that we're not going to have a cap? It's just your recommendation and it's gone forward and now it's gone?
Mr. McDonald?
That's a good question, and that's why I invited Mr. Pink to provide his thoughts on the site alteration bylaw process, because I'm not involved in it. I guess my personal opinion, or my planning opinion and recommendation, is that your site alteration bylaw do include amenity area cap, and that's what I'm recommending. If council decides through the site alteration discussion that that's not going to happen, well, that's a decision the council makes, and that's up to you to make it. If this committee tells me that that's not the direction the township wishes to go, then the policy should clearly change to dovetail with that direction.
Yes, Mr. Pink?
Thank you, Chair. Through you. Keep in mind the current update to the tree preservation and site alteration bylaw were directed by council, and really more technical changes encompassing all of islands, increasing the area that the bylaws are subject to from 200 to 300 feet. We're actually, in some respects, more permissive. We're saying you can have a patio. We are recognizing driveways now. So it's more technical nature. I think I've stated on a number of occasions that really the more substantial changes to those bylaws will come as a result of this process. So if we wrap up the current review, it's largely, again, technical changes, getting short form wording in the bylaw so that bylaw officers can issue tickets, those types of changes. If this official plan discussion and eventually official plan is adopted and approved and directs that there's amenity area limitations and a site alteration cap on waterfront properties, and directs that those be implemented through the site alteration bylaw, staff will return with a further update to the site alteration bylaw with what I would characterize as more substantial or significant changes, where you'll actually will result in less alteration along our shorelines than the current update, which is more of a, frankly, a technical exercise. I'm happy to answer any further questions if there's still a lack of clarity there.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Jagowitz.
Thank you, Chair. I'm on the side that thinks that our official plan should at least talk about it. I'm not sure how, but I have a bigger problem that I'd like to kind of raise, and it's in the form of a question. I know we have rules that deal with roofed structures, and we have now talking about amenities and things that are non-roofed. But then we've got this animal called a storage building that, if my recollection is correct, it comes into lot coverage in the first 200 feet or whatever, but beyond that, I don't believe it comes into lot coverage. So I just like a clarification as to which category a storage building, which, as we found out last week, a storage building is a building that's not a habitable building. So it's everything else and not a garage, not a boathouse. So I just wondered if that's caught in the coverage there or whether it should be dealt with here. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Pink?
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure where, I guess that confusion arose from the public, but I believe I thought I answered it on Friday, and I'll answer it again. The zoning bylaw currently does regulate all roof buildings within 200 feet and also regulates all roof buildings beyond 200 feet as well. It's just that typically if you have a very large 10 plus acre property with a lot of depth beyond 200 feet, that's potentially a large coverage. But the zoning bylaw has always limited to 10% of the area within 200 feet, and then all buildings to 10% of the entire lot. So whether it's, I think the issue at hand, or the way to frame this discussion in my mind, is it doesn't matter what the building's used for, boathouse, storage, cottage, sleeping cabin, gazebo. Our official plan and our zoning bylaw has historically been very prescriptive, very detailed, very restrictive on lot coverage. We have gone, I think most planners, and Mr. McDonald will probably vouch for this, when they pick up our official plan and read the zoning or the lot coverage policies, they essentially read like a zoning bylaw, very limiting to exactly 10%. We do allow consideration of 1/10, so that's where we get this regular 11% variance application. And what that does, I think it's served the municipality fairly well. It has controlled the amount of density we see along our shorelines with roofed buildings. But I think the development we're starting to experience more of, and I think these are the site alteration concerns we're hearing from, is we've gone from roofed buildings to now pools and sport courts and people wanting a rock cut just to put their driveway into the property. And we're seeing a lot of more site alteration on a property, but it's not captured in any existing policy or bylaws because it's not roofed. So the suggestions that we're making are to, through the site alteration bylaw and through the site plan control process, put some limitations on those non-roofed buildings. So it's more of a comprehensive look at how much of a property one can alter, one can develop to ensure that it remains natural. So hopefully that's a very brief sort of overview of, I think, the two recommendations before you.
Supplementary?
Of course.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And thank you for clarifying that. So maybe you could clarify one other thing then. So now we have roofed structures, which include storage buildings, and non-roof structures. And is it now that our official plan currently does not deal with roofed structures either? And what I'm getting at is the 10% or 11% is just in our zoning bylaw. Because in my mind, if we have one in the OP, we should have both. But if neither are in, then I guess that makes sense. So I wonder if you could answer that.
I don't think I understood the question, Mr. Jaglowitz. Could you Okay, David thinks he can answer it for us anyway. So let me see if I get it from this one.
I'll try, but certainly please repeat the question if I'm off the mark. Currently, the official plan has very detailed, again, policies regarding roofed buildings. And with respect to non-roof buildings, it clearly references that they're allowed. We have permitted uses along our waterfront, and it essentially says anything accessory to the residential use. We have policies that talk about tennis courts and sport courts and those kind of features. So clearly they're allowed, but there's no policy, and then there's no subsequent zoning bylaw or tree preservation or site alteration bylaw that puts a limit on the amount of them. So what happens when staff receives a site plan application, we may have some concerns with the overall extent of site alteration that may occur, but our hands are largely tied because we clearly allow tennis courts, we clearly allow pools, all of these things, and then we can't arbitrarily inform applicants or property owners that they can't have them or they need to be smaller. So we're just suggesting that there's some guidance implemented through the appropriate tools that will put a limit to it. So I think to answer your question directly, there are those clear limits and numbers with roofed buildings in the OP and in the zoning bylaw. There's no guidance in the policies as to size limitations for non-roofed. And then, of course, there's nothing in the implementing bylaws as a result.
So that was where I was headed. I thought that was the case, although I was incorrect on the storage building. So in my mind, then we should have, what we're trying to do here is try to keep the lot as natural as possible. So I believe we should have an overall percentage or something that covers roofed and non-roofed, some guideline so that the zoning bylaws can't exceed that, something, because without that, I think you're left to people coming ZBA after ZBA wanting to increase that. So I would suggest that, and we can't do it today, but there's either an overall area of the lot that can be disturbed or not disturbed, or there's two numbers, one roofed and one non-roofed, but it might be simpler to just, I don't know. I think it's a mistake to leave the non-roofed out of the OP. I don't think you want to define the size of a tennis court and all of that. That's not what I'm getting at, but some overall upper limit that is appropriate to anyway, that's my thinking. And so I'm a little concerned that we're leaving this whole subject to the zoning bylaw.
Mr. McDonald, would you put something about the non-roofed in the OP? I think that's what I'm getting. So we have that direction if we end up somewhere else defending it.
Yeah, so I guess what I was saying, and I agree that there is a need for some direction. I guess I'm struggling with putting an actual number in the official plan. But I'm happy to develop as much direction and rationale for including a number in the site alteration bylaw. I don't think an amenity area coverage number works in your zoning bylaw because of the complexities and challenges in interpretation that would result. I think the site alteration is the best, that the site alteration bylaw is the best place. I will note that, there's a general theme in my thinking in terms of how decision-making should occur. And given that every property around the lakes is innately different for whatever reason, there is a need for some type of discretionary decision-making on a case-by-case basis, and the site alteration bylaw allows for that. Establishing a development permit system would also allow for that as well. And I'm thinking about the best way to achieve your objectives, and it's not through the official plan and creating a number. But in the next draft, we'll certainly bolster the rationale for having a number and why it should be in the site alteration bylaw, and then you can take a further look at it.
Okay, thank you. All right, so committee, do we have maybe a thumbs up as to Mr. McDonald creating wording that's going to bolster us, but no definite number in our official plan? I see we're good with that. We're good with that. Okay, thank you. All right.